So we're going to be looking at learning outcome 2 today, which is understand the nature of social and cultural continuity and change. There are 3 assessment criteria in here. 2.1 is to identify the influence that continuity and change have on the development of society at the micro, meso, and macro levels, and I'll explain what they mean. 2.2 is discuss the impact of modernization on social and cultural change. And then 2.3 is apply theories of social change in evaluating change and associated paradigms. So let's get on to the PowerPoint. So when we're talking about micro, meso, and macro, because you're going to see that a lot in the next few slides, I'd like to, are you familiar with what these terms are? Would you like me to explain?
Ma'am, just wait a minute.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah, ma'am, go ahead.
Sure, no problem. I was just asking, because we're going to be looking at micro, meso, and macro levels. Are you familiar with what these things are, or would you like me to explain?
The micro and the macro?
Yeah, micro, meso, and macro, yes.
Yes, like it's micro means a small amount, tiny, and micro is like huge amount of something group or anything could be.
Yeah, it is. It can mean that also, but it also is for this particular thing. It's actually to do with research, so it has those meanings. But for this, when we look at micro, meso, and macro, it just means the levels of research that are happening. So micro will examine small things, like it'll examine individuals, your intentions, your feelings, your beliefs. So it's small groups, just people. Miso actually examines groups of people, so like organizations, teams, or like units. And then macro is like on the bigger scale, so it's very similar to what you just said, but in this terms, it actually examines the political administrative agency, so the government in the country, or any sort of like regulations or any culture, so it's like on a larger scale. Is what these mean, yeah. So for 2.1, we're going to be looking at identifying the influence that continuity and change have on the development of society at the micro, meso, and macro levels. So like it's showing on here, there's a lot of different influences, there's a lot of different impacts that can affect your own circumstances. It can affect how the dynamic of where you're living and how you live. So when within many cultures earlier, it was expected, even now to be honest, in some cultures it's expected that intergenerational living or joint living, as it is normal. So you'd see your grandparents, your parents, yourself with your family, and then your children maybe with their partners and children living within one home. So you'd see lots of different generations. So that was normal, but it's changed now. So a lot of things have actually come into effect. Lots of changes have happened since. So when we look at the micro level, when we're looking at individuals, we're looking at the family structure. So before World War II, it was common to have a nuclear family. So like 2 generations, so parents and grandparents living together. Over the past decades, it's actually more common now to have your families be extended. So you're getting older relatives that might live with younger generations. This can be for cultural reasons. It can be for affordability. I mean, you might see that a lot of people in the Western culture like to buy properties with something called a granny annex. Now, it's just like a little property, like a room, which has a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen, but it's attached to your house, so it can be closed off and used as separate, or it can be integrated within yourselves. So you're still on the same piece of land, but you've got your own privacy. So people are choosing to live together a lot more now. Now, when we go on to the purposes of the family, so, you know, because we're talking about individuals and group, individuals like family bases, we're talking about like the responsibility of children. Now, when we see that, is the responsibility of children actually lies within the immediate family. So you've got your roles of parents. So the parents are the primary caregivers and they're responsible for the child's development. Earlier, it used to be that raising a child was a whole family. The whole family would do it. So grandparents, parents, aunties, uncles, if they're all living together, they'd all take the responsibilities. But because there's a single families that are living together now, so the main responsibility is just going on to the parents as it is. Now, when you look at this, it actually, depending on who's looking after the child or what sort of input there is, it can help to increase your child's sense of belonging. So within a social group, because it's important that you develop them, you teach them cultural aspects that are important to you, you know, respecting, you might think it's very important to respect your elders or, you know, do certain rituals or traditions that you've got. So this is what you instill in them.
Yes.
And then when we think about socialization, so getting together, family culture, you know, not just staying within yourself, you're visiting your extended family, you've got cousins and aunties and uncles or even neighbors that you have that are close to you. So socializing is very important in developing your child or developing children these days. It helps them to get a better aspect of people and also they learn how to mix with different groups of people.
Right.
Now, post World War II, so after World War II, people have been, you know, brought up to a different type of cultural pattern. So before it was that your mom, dad, children, you might have grandparents living with you, you might have aunties and uncles living with you. But after World War II, because there was an increase in divorce rates, this resulted in something called blended families or single parent families. So you've got children that are living together, they might have a different mother or they might have a different father, but they're in the same property now because their parents have married each other. Then we go into the Miso Change. So this is all about like groups and organizations. So we're going to look at education here. Now, people that were born before 1982, we call them Generation X, so Gen X. So so within 1982, before them, computers, they weren't a common thing. It was more task-based. You're doing a lot of things with textbooks, pen and paper. You know, you had more of a formal education. So you weren't really applying to technology. But millennials that have been born after 1982, they prefer to, you know, have used technology. They're more, you know, favorable towards group activities. They can multitask, and because they're more familiar with it, they can adapt to technology quite quickly. And they seem to have more of a positive attitude towards your learning. Now, within this, we've got technology's impact. Now, before it was you wanted to research something. I mean, even seeing colleagues of mine, when we talk about university or college these days, or even, you know, courses that we're studying these days, when you were going down the traditional route, say 10, 15 years ago, you'd physically have to walk into a college, you'd physically have to walk into a school to get your education. You'd be lugging around a big bag with lots of heavy books inside it. You'd have your pencil case, your notebooks. So you'd be carrying around a lot of weight. Now it's so much easier, even talking about what we're doing today now. I've opened my laptop, turned it on, logged on to this lesson. You've done the exact same thing, and we're talking. We're not having to walk around with big books. We're not having to go out of the house to catch buses or drive somewhere. So it's much easier now, isn't it? So we've had the impact that this has had now is made it more accessible, because you can sit down and do this course in your time. You can be doing a full-time job, or there can be a lady that's a full-time mother and, you know, maybe she's working or she's got other responsibilities. Technology has made education so accessible now that I think it's fantastic. So I think it's a wonderful impact that it's had on the world. For now. Yeah.
Yes.
And then when we think about learning, because we're on the education section here. So when we think about learning, there's actually different styles of learning. There's different strategies that you can use. So you've got your visual style, you've got your linguistic, your auditory, and kinesthetic. Now, visual is when you learn by seeing. So you'll see a PowerPoint, you'll see a lesson taking place, and you'll learn. Linguistic is by by your talking about it through speech. Yeah. Auditory is so if you've got a recording or you're listening, and kinesthetic is learning by doing things, so hands-on activities.
Yeah.
Like
practical, right?
Yes, practical. So if you're, for example, doing a mechanical apprenticeship, and you've somebody tells you, right, to change the oil in this car, we have to do this, this, and this, and they just tell you how to do it. You might not know what to do, but if they physically go and show you the oil being changed in the car, and then they say, okay, go and do it on that car, you're learning by doing it.
Right, by seeing it.
So for all of these learning strategies, sometimes it's not necessary that you learn in one style. You could learn in a mix of two styles. So for all these strategies to take place and for them to be effective, you need to be able to communicate and learn and actually see which one suits you best. So it's a bit of a learning process for that.
Right.
And then we're going on to macro changes, so things like governmental, big organizations. So we'll talk about religion's influence now and the secularization of society. So this little section is just based on some information from Australia that I found. It was the most relevant thing that I could, that was the best thing to put on here. So we have a census. Every country has a census, I think every 10 years or so, where they count how many people there are in the country, what they're working as, what their education levels are, and so on. Now, in the 2016 census in Australian history, there is no religion that has overtaken the number of Catholics. So Australia has a very high number of Catholics, and there's none of the religions have actually taken it over since from there. So they report that no religion increased from 19% in 2006 to 30% in 2016. So there's not been an increase really within different types of religions. It's just basically the same as it was. And then also they're saying that young adults between 18 to 34 are more likely to be atheists. So they're saying that we don't have a religion. So this is about 39% of their population are saying we don't have a religion. So Australia has a predominantly religious community of Catholics over there. So 60% of people report that they have, that they're Catholic over there. And then there's a lot of the other people that are there that are either different religions or they're just saying that we don't follow any type of religions. We're atheists, we don't believe in anything. So there is a steady increase in Buddhism, Hinduism, Muslims over there, but it's still not overtaking Christianity or Catholicism from there yet. So we've looked at family structure. we've looked at education, and we've looked at the religious community within Australia, just as an example. Okay. Have you got any questions or anything you'd like to ask before we go on to 2.2?
No, ma'am.
Yeah, fantastic. Go. So 2.2, we're going to discuss the impact of modernization on social and cultural changes. So we're just going to look at the nature and complexity of change. So what is change? Why does it happen? And so on. To be honest, change is something that will always happen within nature. Something or the other is going to take place. So society is always changing, it's always progressing, it's always going forward. There's a rapid change in some places, but then in other places it's extremely slow. So where there's a rapid change, you might be in more of a developed country, you might be in, where there's a lot more technology impacting you, you've got a lot more socialization going on. But then the slower changes might be in countries where you might have not very good transport links. There might be very limited connections. So the change is going to happen slowly there, isn't it? So the best example I can think of that is some tribes that I saw on TV recently. Some tribes in Africa that have been slow to change. But then even within them, they have a beauty to their culture and to the traditions that they have. So sometimes having change isn't necessarily a good thing.
You're right.
Then we come on to the evolutionary changes. And there's a lot of theories on here. I mean, we don't really actually need to get into the theories because it's not really that relevant with what you need to answer the question assessment criteria on here.
Right.
Yeah. But within these, the basic evolutionary theories like Charles Darwin and so on, they're based on the assumption that societies will gradually change. So they come from simple beginnings and they start to get more complex, more they just get a lot more complicated.
Right.
And then we have somebody called Auguste Comte, and he was an early sociologist, and he believed that human societies evolved in a unilinear way. And so what this means is that you're developing in a one-line development, so you're developing forward. So you're not going backwards, you're actually just going upwards and you're progressing in a straight line. So, and according to him, social change means that you're progressing towards something better. Then we've got transformative change. And transformative is a social change, so it's in a philosophical, practical, and strategic process, and it affects the revolutionary change within a society. So it's just how your social transformation, how the society is transforming and changing in effect. That, I mean, even the example we used yesterday of how society has changed recently with what's going on, that is a fantastic example for this as well.
Yes.
So it's just an approach that is applied to, a broad sense of social change and social justice, and it just looks at your socio-cultural, socio-economic, and political revolution. So it's just looking at different aspects of society, to be honest, how culture is changing, how your economy is changing, how maybe you've got different rules and regulations or laws in regards to these changes. I mean, it might not be the most PC example, or might not be the most. The only example I can think of this is there was, and it's a while ago, 10, 15 years ago, there were not many mobile phones around. Now, there's a trend that's gone around in schools and in shopping malls and things where if ladies are wearing short dresses or they're wearing skirts, some people would go up and take photos that would be called upskirting. Now, a while ago, just a couple of years ago, that wasn't it wasn't an offence to do that. But because it's happened so much and it's become a trend, it is actually offence to do that. So if you're caught doing that, you can get a police sentence or a fine. So they put, as a result of how the culture has changed, how the society has changed, they brought that law into effect.
Yes, ma'am.
Then there's resistance to change. So this is what we can call cultural inertia. So what happens is that sometimes you're happy with the way things are. You might be older. You might be happy with the way your family system is. You're happy with how you go to work and how you use certain things, what systems you use or what processes you use. And you don't want to change things. You don't want to, you know, so you might want to think that, right, I'm just happier staying the way I am. I don't want to discard my cultural or my traditions or the way I work. I'm going to keep it exactly the same way it is. Then we get structural changes within society. So when we look at structural changes, it's about strengthening your civil society. So the civil society has a lot of different sectors in it. You've got the business world, you've got trade unions, women's groups, churches, human rights activists. So that's in the way. So social structure, it's just an integral part of, transitioning or transforming to peace. So while in the, when all the world wars and things were going on, World War One, World War Two, there was a lot of conflict and so on going on there. When we talk about structural change or strengthening our civil society, it's about how we're transforming ourselves towards peace, is how we're looking at injustice and we're looking at how we can try and get rid of this conflict and why this happened in the first place and make better changes in the future. I mean, it's not something that is as effective, and maybe it will be in another 10 years or another 20 years, but it's something that is getting worked towards. In other ways, the best way I can think it is that you're learning from your mistakes and you're going forward.
Right. Okay.
And then we look at social change. So this diagram, this image here, it just goes through different agents of socialization. So we've got a section on family, where you've got your children or the younger ones are, acquiring their language. They're learning how to socialize. They're learning, the adults or their grown-ups are being their role models. So you know how to interact with people. Then you've got your peers, so it's your colleagues or your friends. It's about what sort of activities you get up to, what sort of trends you follow. Then your religion, your values, your love for others, how important your religion is. And then just so on, just through a few things like government, how they'll, help you with the laws and any societal changes. So then media, work, your background. So just a few points that you can.
Yes, social change.
Yes. And then finally for this one, directions of change. So when we're looking at change within society, it's caused by a change within the culture. So like we said yesterday, culture is constantly being adapted and it's, being formed. A lot of things are getting changed within that. So culture is something that is always having, losing an aspect of something, but it's also gaining an aspect of something. So you might get rid of one aspect of your culture, or you might stop following, but then you've adapted that and start doing a different type of tradition or a different type of get together. So it's through the invention, discovery, and diffusion, which are, considered to be the main sources of cultural change. So it's just how, to be honest, it's how you're adapting yourselves, how you're adapting yourselves towards where you're living in accordance to the society that you're in accordance to the environment you're in. So do certain cultures or traditions, do they follow what is deemed acceptable? and then you go on and change those towards that. I mean, there's a lot of things now which, in good 30, 40 years ago, FGM, if you might have heard of it, was very big in a lot of countries. And now that's illegal to do. But that was part of culture for certain religions, for certain groups of people. But it's not allowed now, not at all. It's a punishable thing to do. So slowly but surely, this is becoming more recognized, that this tradition that was done, this cultural aspect, is not, it's abuse. You're not allowed to do that. So that was 2.2. Would you like me to clarify anything, or would you like to ask any questions?
No, ma'am. It's clear. No problem at all.
Fantastic. Okay. Go on to 2.3. So this is the last criteria for learning outcome 2. And we're going to look at applying theories of social change in evaluating change and associated paradigms. So we're going to look at the evolutionary theory on here. So when we look at Charles Darwin, he's the person, the theorist, that said that that believes that people have gone through an evolutionary change from being apes and turning into men from there. So, and I know that it's in some religious backgrounds that's very disputed, but we're just going to be talking about how it is here. So when the Darwinian theory is about the biological evolution, it's about how society and culture, how it's regarded and how it's undergoing changes, and it's demonstrating some sort of trends. So it's following a certain pattern. So it is believed that society and culture were subject to the same general laws of biological and organism growth. So some thinkers even identified evolution with progress and proceeded to project into the future more and more perfect and more better adapted social and cultural forms. So they're thinking that with evolution, we're getting processed, we're getting better progress. So this is what we need to do. This is the way we need to move forward. So they're adapting their social and their cultural beliefs to affect this. Then there's some basic assumptions and distinctive features of the evolutionary change. So the basic assumption of this theory is that change is the characteristic feature of human society. So we look at the present observed condition of society, and it's presumed that the result is a change of the past, and it's assumed that change is natural, that it's going to happen no matter what you do, that it will take place, that change will happen. It's also assumed that change is basically the result of an operation of forces within the society or culture, so that all of these theories of evolution that exist, it is believed that an infinite improvement is there, so there's always something better. So you might be going through a good phase now, but there's always something better ahead.
Right.
So all of these assumptions, they're actually summarized as the following points that I've got here. So number one, that change is inevitable and it's natural. That change is gradual and continuous. Change is sequential and in certain stages, so it goes in sequences. That all successive stages of changes are higher and they proceed over each stage. So what they mean is that evolution is progressive. So you're not going backwards, you're always going forwards.
Okay.
Number 5 is that stages of change are non-reversible. 6, that forces of change are inherent in the object. That direction of change is from simple to complex, and that all societies pass through the same stages of development. So you might pass through the same stages of development with all societies, but that doesn't mean that it happens at the same time. So some societies might do it faster, some might do it slower. And then we go on to the conflict theory. So conflict theorists, they don't believe that societies evolve smoothly. They don't think that they're having a seamless evolution to a higher level. They think that there is conflict, that sometimes mistakes do happen or sometimes good things don't happen.
Mm.
What they believe is that conflicting groups struggle to ensure progress. So this is somebody, Costa, in 1956, that he said this. So conflict theorists assert that conflict is a necessary condition for change. So like when we're looking at wars that have happened or wars that are happening now or issues that are happening within the world. So what this means is that sometimes these things are necessary for us to have a change. So you have to go through some of these conflicts for you to learn from them and for you to be a better society.
A better society.
Yes. And they believe that conflict is associated with all types of social change in some way or other. I mean, when we look at conflict theory, I mean, been talking about conflict in the world as general. But if you look at it on a personal level, say within your own life as well, there might have been a situation where there's a falling out within family, or there's a particular thing that you don't like that someone does. You might not like it. There might be an argument. There might be an issue between yourselves for a little while, but then you overcome it, and then you learn that okay, they don't like it when I do this. I'm not going to do this now. So even that helps you change. Then we're just going to look at understanding the conflict theory. So the conflict theory is used to explain a wide range of social phenomena, so wars, revolutions, poverty, discrimination, and domestic violence. So when we look at the modern conflict theory, it's actually heavily influenced by the ideas of Karl Marx. So it may be regarded as the offshoot of his economic theory of social change, which states that economic change only occurs and produces other change through mechanisms of intensified conflict between social groups and between different parts of the social system. Now, when I look at this, what I understand from this is many, many years ago, there was a potato famine in Ireland. I think that was in the 1930s or the 1940s, if I remember correctly. Now, this was where there wasn't that much of an import and export going on. Ireland they used to predominantly grow potatoes, but because of weather, because of a lot of different aspects, their crops weren't growing. So they were starving, they were dying. There was a lot of poverty going on there now. Now, due to these type of issues that have happened, and it's probably can be applied to anywhere that's having a struggle at the moment, is that you end up having a better, because of change now. If certain farmers are able to grow certain things, it's not that they won't likely to starve because there's a good transformation links in there. You can get transport in and out. You are able to import, export certain foods and things. So it's not going to be as deadly now as it was 40, 50 years ago.
Right.
So this conflict theory, it also suggests that society exists in a perpetual state of conflict, so that everybody, no matter who it is, as a general, as within your own home life, that there's some type of conflict, that there's some type of issue going on. So it's not always peaceful and harmonious. Something is always happening.
Right.
And conflict theorists actually think that this is because we're competing for the same things. We're competing for the same finite resources. So we're competing for social resource, and then this might lead to potential for conflict. And then we come on to the functionalist theory. So functionalism views society and its inhabitants as in need of certain products and service, meaning that they need certain things. So you need a justice system, you need a government, you need a way of producing goods and services. And what they're saying is that social institutions, actually are part of the overall society, so that different parts contribute positively to the operation or functioning of the system as a whole. So we need our companies, we need a shop down the street. We need to have a government in place. We need to have like police and fire services. So obviously, we actually need functionalism. Think that these are the things that we need to have. If we don't have these things, that we might have a decline in society. So I can't speak to it. Functionalism, it sees social institutions as conveying the values and norms that are mutually agreed upon by individuals as forming the social contract regarding interaction. So when we go out, we know that we're not going to walk out in the street and start screaming or shouting or hitting or, we're going to behave in a certain way. If we're really depending on which environment you're in, you could be with your family, you're going to be a lot more open, you're going to be a lot more jokey, you probably be more yourself than you will than if you're, say, at work. You might want to, be looked at as a professional. You might want to be looked at as the easygoing person, but you still need to behave in a certain way, and you end up learning what those behaviors are depending on where you are. And then our final theory is the interactionist theory. So interacting with people, is a sociological theory, and it places a lot of emphasis on the interactions that happen between individuals or groups. So, whoever you're talking about. So it's about who you interact, and it's also known as the micro level of sociological analysis. So when we go back to micro at the beginning that we talked about, so micro is just about the individuals, about their feelings, their beliefs, their intentions. So that's what we're referring to here. And we also believe, interactionists believe, that the sum and nature of these interactions actually form society itself, and it helps you to form your own social self. Now, this is because one evaluates others and also evaluates the self. So what this means is that you're looking at other people, you're seeing what their behavior is, how they hold themselves, how they interact with other people. So you're evaluating their behaviors, and then you're also looking at yourself and you're saying, oh, I'm not going to do that particular thing that she does, or he is always looking professional, or he's always looking on, looks like he knows what he's doing. I'm going to try and adapt his behavior. So it could be that maybe you talk too much and maybe you talk too little. So maybe you want to adapt yourself and say, I'll do more conversation. I'll try and be more interactive with people and so on. Right. So all this means is that you're modifying your own behavior, to create.
To increase your personality.
Yes. That's right, yeah. And it just looks at, so this evaluation that you're doing continuously of other people, of yourself, it just means that you're maintaining society, you're maintaining its institutions, and that you're always in the process of change. You're always, doing an ongoing evaluation. You're always doing something to, develop yourself, is what the interactionist theory believes. So that was 2.3. So we looked at the micro, meso, and macro levels and how these affect development. We've looked at social and cultural changes, so family, education, laws, government, and then we looked at a consensus that happened for Australia. And then we've looked at the conflict, evolutionary, functionalist, and interactionist theories on here. Is there anything you'd like me to go over, or any questions you'd like to ask?
No, ma'am.
Yes. Fantastic. So I'm going to turn the recording off.
All right.